My name is Alan Reed. I'm the Executive Director of the Chicagoland Food and Beverage Network, and I welcome you all to our Founder Series finale for 2020. When we started 2020, we had no idea it was going to be as interesting and crazy as it has been, but really appreciate all of you sticking with us for our virtual events. This is our, wow, I think 55th, 54th virtual event for the year. We're so excited to be able to bring together the incredible food and beverage industry of the Chicagoland area, and now far beyond, as we do things virtually. So that has been a pleasure, and we thank you for coming along on the ride with us and keeping this incredible industry connected and coming together and all great things happening. For those of you who don't know the Chicagoland Food and Beverage Network, we are a 3.5-year-old mission-driven industry organization. Our job is to bring together the incredible 4,500 companies in the food and beverage category that call Chicagoland home in order to do three things: grow the industry, grow the local economy, and create jobs. This is important every single day, but especially important in the middle of the global pandemic we are all living through. And these will continue to be important as we continue through this incredibly unusual time. Thank you for all, again, all for sticking with us and working so nicely together as an industry. One incredible way we've seen industry come together is through an organization we started earlier this year called Bigger Table. Bigger Table brings together this same incredible network to collaborate on a series of charitable and economic growth initiatives. We put together 250,000 servings of healthy food that was donated directly to food banks, and we're doing it yet again. We're in the midst of doing that now. 250,000 servings of it'll end up being a delicious, no sugar added, high protein, high fiber, hot cocoa that will go to food banks as soon as we get it done. Every ingredient, every piece of packaging, all of the formulation, all of the work is donated by our incredible industry. We're so proud to be a part of it and to be helping to move all of that forward. Happy to tell anybody more details if you're interested in it. Feel free to send me a note in the chat box or email me at any time. And with that, and let's not forget to get social. Such a great way to communicate. So please reach out to us, continue the conversation there, as well as with our partners. It might be the most positive and uplifting thing you see in social media this week. So really want you to stay connected. Also, just a housekeeping note, please use the chat and Q&A features here in Zoom so that you can interact with our panel. You don't have to remember those questions, just put them right into the Q&A feature, and our moderator extraordinaire, Steve Gaither, will make sure that they get brought into the room and that amazing things happen from there. And with that, I will turn it over to Steve and this incredible panel we have put together today. Steve.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Founder Series finale here. I'm Steve Gaither, CMO with CA Fortune, privately held national sales agency, sales accelerator for emerging brands, a branding and digital shop, an e-com agency, a retail activation group, collectively a consumer brands agency. I'm very biased, but Chicago is the shining star in the food ecosystem from big to small. You got big folks like Mars, PepsiCo, Conagra, Kraft Heinz, Mondelez, middle market manufacturers, the Minias, the Ganellas, the Stampedes, Chicago Rockstars, RX Bar, Simple Mills, Farmer's Fridge. Incredible scene with emerging brands, incubators, accelerators, big food innovation, and then smart money from VC groups like S2G, Advantage Capital. Well, typically we look through the lens of the founders and emerging brands. Today, I thought I'd flip the script a bit, check the view from the other side of the fence, through the perspective of larger food and bev, and from VC and private equity. And to help us navigate, we've brought together Chicago's finest, and we've asked them to show us how the sausage is made. I've got an incredible panel here, starting with Big Food, Bridget, head of Snack Futures with Mondelez, Emerging Brand Gone Big, Jim with our X Bar on the BC side, Audra from S2G, from the Insights/PE side, Sean from Curion Insights, who's tied with Monroe Capital. So please take a minute and give yourself some due credit. We'll start with Bridget. Give yourself a little hurrah.
Good morning, everyone. I love the hurrah. I'll give myself a hurrah when I wake out of bed. I am based in Chicago, as we all are, with Mondelez International. Pending our beautiful opening one day down to Fulton Market in our new offices. I am a Chicago born and bred from the suburbs around here. And if you're not familiar with Mondelez, it is one of the world's largest snacking companies, 26 billion, with some of the hero brands that you know of Triscuit and Oreo and Cadbury. And what I lead, though, is a very different side of our house, well connected to what we can talk about, the big machine and all those capabilities. But Snack Futures is actually our innovation and venture hub, where we do two main things in that we invent, we create new brands and businesses for consumers trying to be leading edge and well-being, as many of you are, so we can feel that empathy. And we'll talk about those brands. Many of them are sitting behind me, and they're live in D2C with the pivots of COVID that you have all experienced. And then we do venture. So we invest into emerging brands as well, into what we can see as that next generation with us. And then we try and bring the best of both that invent and invest together of capital and capabilities. So lots to do. And of course, we'll talk about that third leg of M&A as well that the bigger house does. So thrilled to be here with all of you.
Jim?
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks, Bridget and Steve and the rest of the panel. Jim Murray, I'm the president of RX Bar. So RX Bar started as a clean label protein bar here in Chicago, just west of Fulton Market. So know that area pretty well. We're still headquartered downtown Chicago near the Merchandise Mart. We are now, we've since been acquired and are now part of the Kellogg company. I joined RX Bar, early on, probably 2016. Started in finance, helped build out the finance function, and kind of worked my way up through different roles of the organization, and have the, humbling and awesome responsibility of stepping in as both of the founders, have moved on from the organization. So it's been an exciting kind of wild ride, but really love what I get to do every day.
Cool. Audra?
Cool. Hi, everyone. My name's Audra. I am a vice president at S2G Ventures. S2G, we manage about 700 million in capital. Bridget will be neighbors just down the street on Fulton Market. So we're headquartered in Chicago. We do have a handful of managing directors out west. But we as a venture fund, so we invest across the entire food supply chain. Everything from ag tech to ingredients to consumer-facing brands and restaurants. Some of our portfolio companies have included Beyond Meat, Sweet Green, Maple Hill Creamery, to name a few. We've got about 50 companies in our portfolio. And on my end, I'm super excited to be here. I think this has been both a challenging time for our industry, but also a time with so much opportunity to really hone in on what is core to your product or to what the consumer wants, and an opportunity to reflect on what the future might look like, and take a few chances and evolve to be better on the back end. So really excited about today's conversation and looking forward to digging in.
Thanks, Audra. Sean?
Hi, I'm Sean Bishoya. I'm the CEO of Curion Insights, which we focus on product insights through testing, taste tests to, more advanced type of research. I think we've probably touched many of the brands that we're talking about today with the leaders on the phone. So we have 5 facilities around the country. We probably work with probably close to 300,000 consumers a year with over 1,500 SKUs. primarily large CPGs, but within that, we really focus on innovation because there's innovation machines inside these large CPGs. And it's going to be an interesting conversation to kind of see their pivot post-COVID with innovation of what's happening. So looking forward to that conversation. And I guess prior to that, from a private equity standpoint, we're backed by Monroe Capital here in Chicago. I'm in Chicago, the headquarters in Chicago. Monroe owns about 145 companies with about 11 billion under management. And then prior to that, I was a managing partner with Sterling Partners here in town. So looking forward to today's conversation.
Cool. All right, everybody. To set the stage, let's talk trends and data first, right? So, and let's talk pre-COVID. We'll save COVID for the grand finale, right? Natural and conventional trends. So a lot's changed sort of over the past 5 years. Natural channels acting more like conventional by actually reducing the price, increasing SKU count. Conventionals acting a little bit more like natural. It's taking the 2 aisles of natural now and putting them in line. So you've got your gluten-free crackers right next to Ritz. You've got the shmush going on, and emerging brands led by the growth of cleaner, healthier food has sort of led to this disruption. Jim, you were on sort of the emerging brand side of this at one point. Hit me with your growth and what you witnessed along this timeline.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's it's a trend that had continued to grow and expand over the past couple of years. Our RX Bar was started, really probably at the early piece of the trend that is kind of moving across the market. And Peter and Jared, what they saw was an opportunity within the protein bar space to build a clean label approach to protein bars, which really didn't exist in the market at that time. The idea around it was not that it would kind of necessarily expand across retail where it is today, but the focus of the product was really around a core group of consumers that was like really into this diet trend and clean eating. The paleo diet was starting to take off at that point in time, and as the business grew and spent a lot of time really honing in on the messaging. And what the kind of the point of difference and what the brand delivered from a differentiation standpoint. And as that was ready to go, made some packaging changes. What you started to see in the market was it performed pretty well in the natural space, right? The Sprouts, the Whole Foods, the Erewhons, et cetera. But as it continued to grow, it didn't need to live just in that part of the market, right? You see these trends starting to take root, in the Walmarts and the Krogers and all the larger retailers, or customers that we now have, which really, as that trend expanded across the broader market, what we found was that this messaging and this clean eating trend was becoming, much more popular and it resonated with a much broader audience than we originally assumed.
Bridget, did Snack Futures sort of arise out of this, or was it concurrent? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I would say for us, we have been watching the market for some time of where consumers' interests are, of I would say the consciousness, both for the environment and for what they're putting in their bodies and seeking more choices, and the diversity of when I snack now and that blurring of meals to eating. So it's all just food and how that fits into lives. And so for Snack Futures, it was, we needed to have an option to go outside of some brands that we currently have in our portfolio to really address some of these, what we would call kind of hyper consumer centric areas, where if this one tribe, this one group doesn't buy it, no one will. So we actually put on a very strong startup hat of mindsets and behaviors and said, okay, let's go after that group. In the mindset that knowing that these trends are going to start going mainstream and there will be an opportunity for scale of them and they're becoming more commonplace. And I think the flip side is taste is king. So our mantra in Snack Futures is good for people, kind to the planet, deliciously fun. If it doesn't taste good, you're not going to get anywhere with all of it. You'll get trial once, and everyone's looking to try something once. The question for us is, where's the repeat? So I'll highlight one since it came in the mail today, and I have it. So Dirt Kitchen Snacks. this was probably one of the first, and it's D2C nationally now, and it's in stores in California. But the piece here was, we wanted to look at, the world of better snacking, and vegetables and veggie lovers really find, this is hard. Time, preparation, how do you take it portable? How do you make it taste more interesting? We know 91% of Americans are looking to get more vegetables in. And yet that world of, really both the clean and let me see real visible pieces of what we've done was an opportunity. So I think it's the balance of how do we address a market that will start small, as you say, and gets that right pull by the right group of consumers, and then can migrate into that mainstream and mass. Because as part of Mondelez, for us, the game will be scale, and how do we get these across everyone. But like any brand building, you want to do it right. You want to have the patience. You want to make sure you're really addressing the consumer needs versus the business needs.
Cool, cool. Audra, you've sort of hit a pretty wide continuum, both sort of on size of company as well as vertical. What have you seen along this same path?
It's been really interesting. So S2G was founded in 2014. Along the same lines that Jim and Bridget talked about. So this shifting consumer that's looking for cleaner label, healthier eating, more assurance in what they're eating. And for us, we have seen this huge ripple effect across the entire supply chain. So now what you're starting to see, as Bridget mentioned, if people want more vegetables or they're checking what's in the label, there's this drive towards finding new ingredients that you could incorporate, whether it's moringa or whether it's like a myceliated, a fermented mycelium. There's just a bunch of really interesting technology that's being developed on the ingredient side. And I think that's also trickling down now to the farm and starting to drive differences in how people think about working the fields, how they think about adopting more sustainable practices, and also linking the grower and the producer of a lot of these commodities to the actual food manufacturer and to the consumer. So like Land O'Lakes, for instance, has a photo of some of their co-op members, some of their farmers on their packaging. And when they did that, they saw something like a 2 to 6% lift in sales. So I think this driving towards more visibility, healthier options, I think it's just having a huge impact on the entire supply chain and opening up opportunities, obviously in ingredients and in agriculture, but also for brands that build up their own supply chains, have novel supply chains, or are willing to explore some of these newer developments that are coming online.
Sean, there's been this rise of this conscientious consumer, right? The consumer that gives a crap about what she puts on her body, how animals are treated, and the carbon footprint, right? How has that changed from a qualitative perspective over the past years?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, unlike, I guess, the other panel members, I mean, what we struggle with is, the companies we work with, and sometimes we work with, Mondelez and the innovation group, but a lot of these companies are 18 months, 2 years out, right? So we're looking at trends that are going to be happening in the next 2 years, both from a qualitative standpoint with our consumers. When we do the testing, of course, it's all quantitative, it's all very data driven. But, I'm not sure this will bring smiles or frowns, but, if you go back 11 months ago, 12 months ago, we couldn't get enough cannabis. That was the trend of the world that was going to happen. Every product, everything that was going on. Now, we're not seeing much testing or much buzz around that now, outside in the sense of food and products. Definitely everything that the panelists have said in the sense of natural vegetables. We deal with a lot of alternative meat companies. I'll just say that in the sense of helping them understand. So we are seeing a lot of trends in it. I think we'll talk a little bit later about some of the data we're seeing, but also some of the innovation that's happening as well as they approach the market. So from a qualitative standpoint, a lot of things that, unfortunately, we're not like, the thing, but we saw these trends probably 2 years ago, right? As we started digging into the data about And I think that's the natural extension of a lot of the fitness brands that we take care of as well. So we have those consumers. So we're talking to those panels. We're talking to those consumers all the time, but we're also trying to figure out what's next.
Okay, you got it. So for big food, obviously there's been a lot of disruption going on with a lot of the big holdcos, a lot of the smaller emerging brands is sort of nipped at the heels, et cetera. So with this evolving landscape, legacy brands typically have had three routes to go, right? Either cleaner ingredients with my existing brands, internal innovation, or acquiring emerging brands. So Bridget, you with Snack Futures, you kind of guys do all three. You invent new brands, reinvent existing brands, as well as the venture side. So tell me about your approach and how you sort of attack this.
Yeah, and I will say, all of Mondelez is looking at this, particularly on the base businesses, the existing brands. And that was something that we wanted to carve out. We went back and forth of, the Snack Futures help reinvent someone. And the truth is, when you start touching someone's brands and businesses, they have to own that as if it's their own. So we have areas where we felt we can stretch the current brands. Triscuit's a wonderful example. They also have the farmers on the back when you said that, of our Michigan farmers. So you have to do all three, right? They're all levers at different scale. And I think you said we'll talk later about kind of size and what we're looking for, but you really need to do both. You have to keep your current brands relevant, and both in communications and in formulation, packaging, all of it. I think where we sit with Snack Futures is we sit more on that bleeding edge of some of those trends of what's going on. So we can go back to the brands being like, there's an amazing opportunity that we think actually could fit really well with this brand. Or you don't have to do everything. You just have to look through your brand through a 2020 consumer. People are like, oh, we haven't looked at the brands. Everyone's just great. They inherit their brand, they run their brand, and they're maintaining it. But sometimes you're just kind of going with that momentum. And the question is first to be like, as Audra says, what's in our ingredient statement? How are people now looking at the brands that they 5-10 years ago, even 3 years ago, may not have had, in their consciousness, that now they're having a different view of how they're assessing this. So what can we do to adjust there? And that whole renovation, we try and pass those learnings on, or growth opportunities where we see cohorts expanding that we think this brand could address it, we go there. Then we do the invention. Sometimes on the core, the internal Mondelez kind of core brands will do that. For us, it was really pushing, we do cookies and crackers, gum and candy, and chocolate is our kind of bread and butter. So for someone to say, we need to do air-dried veggies and nuts, we have to go out of that system. And yet we think it's absolutely the right place to be. Or we have another brand called Cacao, which actually takes the cacao fruit from our chocolate supply chain, which normally gets wasted, and we reimagine that into smoothie balls. So now we're taking the fruit side of a chocolate supply stream that's very different. So it's a little bit of how do you see the assets you have and then see where new opportunities can be. And of course, then we have the venture side where for us is how do we start investing in helping the emerging brands grow? Because the truth is they've already gotten a head start. So I think there's a nice humility that has been bubbling around for big companies for a long time, but has really erupted in that we don't know everything, we can't do everything, and there are people who have known and are starting this train. So how do we join and partner with them and start? And then on the M&A side, for those who've really gotten some solid traction, Perfect Snacks is a great example, Tate's another. How do we then buy them when they're at a sizable place where, and Jim can speak to this with Kellogg, how it's going, is how do we not mess them up? How do we allow them to be themselves, to stay true to honoring their purpose for the consumer? And yet how do we then kind of get them to the mass that we want them to be?
Well, that's a good segue. I mean, Jim, you sort of were on this emerging brand acquired by big brand. Seems like, at least third party looking in, Kellogg sort of let you guys drive your own innovation, sort of the mothership letting the speedboat do its thing rather than folding it into the ocean liner, right? Tell me more about how that's evolved, and has there been any speed bumps along the way?
Yeah, no, so I think so with with the relationship with Kellogg, what we've really been able to establish is an interesting structure, I think, where we can now, as a part of the Kellogg company, we're able to, really operate with scale, with efficiency and execution that's required at kind of the stage of the business that the RX Bar brand is in now. But we also have the infrastructure and the capabilities from when we started the business, right? And the culture and the purpose that Bridget mentioned around entrepreneurial spirit and moving fast and taking calculated risks, et cetera. So we're now able to operate at kind of both ends of the spectrum, which is, I think it's kind of different, in the industry. That also leaves us with innovation, those capabilities of how the business was started, right? RX Bar was started with D2C, kind of like a wholesale online business, and then on Amazon, right? And all that infrastructure and that small parcel drop ship capability is still in place, and it allows us to think about how we launch innovation differently, right? So we can use that infrastructure to reach consumers in a different way and test products at smaller scale, take some feedback, take some learnings before we kind of roll it out across the market. And that allows us to, move quickly, tweak and iterate, and then take products to retail that have, data feedback from a consumer that has tested it, purchased it, and told us what they thought about it. So I think that there's a different innovation approach that we're able to kind of bring to the table. Now, we don't have to do that across everything. If we launch a new RX Bar flavor, we don't have to test it online like that. We can kind of roll that out across the country, but it enables us to be adaptable with different innovation.
Now, Audra, you talked about having sort of this full continuum between production, supply chain, as well as the brands itself. Has that given you guys a unique perspective on the way you guys approach from your initial thesis to what you've learned along the way?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we have like a bunch of different examples around how our systems approach has influenced our view of opportunities in the space. So for instance, being invested in Beyond Meat gave us a perspective on yellow pea and the importance of yellow pea and opportunities in seed breeding and formulating so that you could, kind of reduce sugar and kind of improve the process overall, improve digestibility, things like that. So I think taking that full spectrum approach is really, really helpful. And I think it also enables companies to identify opportunities that are not obvious. So, if you are an emerging business, you might be really interesting for as a JV partner for an ingredient company, for instance, or maybe there's benefit in partnering with someone more on the left-hand side of the production side of things. But yeah, I mean, across the food supply chain, food has just been such a central talking point in how people have experienced COVID and where things are kind of evolving towards. And so, I take a step back and I look at deal activity in the food space since March 1st, for instance, and it's been pretty strong. And to me, that signals that number one, the private market is pretty active in the food space, continues to be looking for new innovative opportunities. And then as Jim and Bridget were talking about, I think the big CPGs are really looking at innovation in a very different way than they used to be. And I think they're taking this moment in time to really push forward with their own innovation agendas and push on different themes that perhaps previously were considered too niche. So we're really bullish on the space, deal activity is strong, and there's a bunch of new vehicles that are coming online to continue to push innovation forward.
Cool. Sean, you've sort of seen some of the best practices when it comes to acquisitions and internal innovations, and you've probably seen some of the worst practices as well. Sort of either on the client side or the portfolio side, what have you sort of seen work, not work along this way?
Yeah. Wow. It's a big question. I was, Jim you know, I was trying to see how he's going to navigate your question because, and I don't think I'm offending him in any way, but RX Bar, first bought it, was the textbook of what to do wrong when a big company buys a brilliant brand like that. And what they've done in the last 2 years has been amazing at pulling themselves out, being disruptors. That culture is back. And we've seen that just in, you know, talking to folks and seeing that culture live and breathe. I think what we've seen as a big change, and the problem is, you know, we're surfing right now this, do we talk about COVID or we don't? But one of the big things we've seen, and really, frankly, the CPGs that we deal with are having a hard time because either, you know, they can't really within their supply chain and within the manufacturing get to market fast enough for testing. They can't get the innovation products, you know, maybe with their co-mans. And certainly it's much different now than it was back in March and April. But one of the things we're seeing is the leverage of technology. So I'm sure all of you know this, but there's a lot of technologies out there where we're paying attention and they're paying attention to the top searches. Like, what are they searching right now on Amazon? We have all the data. What are they searching right now on Walmart.com? And it's amazing. You know, somebody told the story yesterday, you know, a year and a half ago, people were searching for charcoal toothpaste. I mean, charcoal toothpaste, right? So we were able, you know, companies like that were able to move quickly, went to market. And we're also seeing it now. The question is, the very large ships we're dealing with and their brands and their insights group, as they're looking at the data of like what is popular right now and can they react fast enough. So with all that as background, you know, we're, from an acquisition standpoint, it's changed dramatically. I mean, it's just, I mean, we'd be an idiot without saying it's changed dramatically in the last 9 months with how we're looking at multiples, how we're looking, how, you know, other private equity we work with look at valuations, and it's changed quite a bit. So I don't know if I'm answering that question.
No, I gotcha.
But I want to build on one more thing that seems to be a theme here, that we did a survey literally 60 days ago of about 150 insights people at these large corporations, talking about innovation, talking about what does 21 look like and what does 22 look like. And Audrey and Bridget are absolutely right. It is coming back it's coming back much, much differently, which I hope we can talk about, but it is coming back. I'm looking at the stats that 81% of those responded, 81% said that it's coming back at a multiple of 2x to 3x of the budgets for innovation in these large corporations. So I think that's good news for the industry as a whole.
Cool. And you brought up a good point. I do want to, I want one question before we get into sort of this post-COVID data world, which is a big shift. So just quickly, from an investment or acquisition strategy, and direct, obviously, Bridget and Audra, indirect, if you guys have any perspective, what are sort of your guys' parameters on revenue size, EBITDA, growth, connection to your guys' existing strengths, like category adjacency, production, supply chain channels? And I want to keep it to about 3 to 5 minutes on that so we can get into the data, but I think this is important. So folks know what you're looking for on the strategic side, either from investment or acquisition, as they're going down their individual paths. So have at it, whoever, free for all.
Audrey, you want to go first?
You should go first. You go first.
Okay. So I'll start with, again, just a little bit of who we are, because that gives context, right? So if you look at the Mondelez portfolio, it has been bakery, biscuit, you know, cookies and crackers. It's been confectionery, gum, and then chocolate. So when we think about where we want to go, it's like, how do you leverage either your strengths or how do you build in areas that you don't have? And so, and I would say, and then we in Snap Futures, and we're really pushing this hard in the company too, is we want to be the snacking leader, which means you have to be category agnostic. You have to say, my first question I ask everyone when they come up with an idea or a startup that comes to us, I'll be like, is it a snack? Like, it's a great proposition, but it's not a snack. And I have that as a kind of primary filter of what we're looking for. So when you really think about that usage, You might be an ingredient, which could be a wonderful play that we can partner and build something around. You might be an incredibly delivery service. And actually in venture, we're willing to look more at those technologies, whether they're food technologies to help our R&D, whether they're distribution and other places of how do we access people more than our traditional, you know, you think of the mainstream grocery channels and our others. So if you think about perfect snacks, it's a snack, it's well-being, and it's in the refrigerated section. So it gives us a part of the store where we tend to be shelf stable. Our give and go. I'm just going to riff on some of our M&A strategies, right? It's a bakery section, so it's a different part of the store. So where are you complementary to a snacking, you know, machine? That's kind of the first piece, and then we go into, you know, is there a strategic fit with the company and where we're looking. In venture, we tend to start looking at investments when you're at least 5 to 10 million in net revenue, and then I would say on the M&A side, and we can get you finer details, but when you're starting to hit that 50, 70, 100 million mark is where the scale is already there versus, and we are quite mindful of the difference of an acquisition can be quite transactional, right? The machine is somewhat operating its own that can be brought in-house, whereas in venture, we want to help, you know, your cultivation and as you grow and mature. So understanding that time horizon as well, which is why the numbers obviously are quite different. And then the piece is where we can help you the most. So what capabilities can we give you in procurement or distribution? If you already have an amazing North America footprint, we have an international one we can help you expand in. So, but you have to be ready for that. So that's the piece there. So hopefully that helps and gives some.
Audra, your perspective on the investment
Yeah,
side?
so we as a venture fund, we're really flexible in terms of the check sizes we write and the stage of business that we invest in. So we'll write checks as small as 250, 500K, and we'll go up to 20 million. I would say generally we're open to investing in pre-revenue seed stage businesses as well as growth stage businesses. So like, you know, in the last quarter or two, we've invested in a seed stage business called Solaria Bio, and we've also invested in a number of kind of later stage businesses like Benson Hill. So for us, it's really about, as Jim mentioned earlier, like finding that niche and really going deep to solve an industry's pain point. And as venture capitalists, we recognize that like the EBITDA might not be there at that moment, or you know, you're kind of playing around with margins, you're playing around with product market fit and business models that make sense. So we're very cognizant in the early stages that that's just part of the process, and you need to test stuff out to see what makes sense. With our later stage businesses though, there is, and I would say this is something that has shifted in the last year, there's definitely an increasing focus, particularly on the branded side, on margins, being able to show profitability, being able to show, you know, if you are to get acquired, what are the economics that will make this business meaningful for anyone who acquires them. So, you know, if a brand can demonstrate that they have certain awareness or certain turns, and if you pair that with the scalability of a Mondelez or a Kellogg, that could take off. I think that is something that we're constantly thinking about with some of our later stage brands. And I think
so there's going to be a path from EBITDA to EBITDA, right?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot happening, and there's a lot of data that's available now too, to Sean's point. And so I think for businesses that have the data and can drill in and really pinpoint, like, this is what I'm focused on, and this is why, and this is how I get from point A to point Z. I think that's really powerful. And for us as investors, we're very focused on that. And in terms of just last point, key themes. So we've been seeing a lot of traction in this concept of a SPAC, and key themes that come up in that category are really like better for you brands, plant-based platforms, high protein platforms, and then obviously platforms that are focused on sustainability and regenerative, and that could be packaging as well as a handful of other things. So yeah, a lot of flexibility, but also some key things that as businesses scale and look for exit paths, I think there's a few ways to differentiate yourself.
And Steve, if I may just say one other thing, because I think I gave some of the M&A examples that are on the bigger side, but on the venture side, To Roger was saying, again, think strategic. We have gone anywhere of a very small company called Uplift who does pre and probiotics. So gut health was an area of interest, but that historically you would have said was small, but between strategic and she was going into cookies, there was a neat fit there. And then we have Hue Chocolate on the other side, which was a lot more developed premium paleo chocolate. So again, how those fits our sizes. And I will say, look for more to come from us next year as we play more in working with startups. So that will be my.
Cool. I want to focus the rest of the time, if you guys don't mind, sort of on obviously the past 5 or 6 months. A lot's happened, right? So obviously COVID hit. You had a bunch of pantry stuffing happening in March. People going back to conventional, and then post that, people going back to natural, bigger bulk plays, less grab and go, larger formats moving. You had the slower food movement going with pancake mixes, spices, sugar, flour, more people eating at home with their families. And at the same time, you had 2 weird things going on. One, this growth of click and collect, that's grown 95%, where people go to the grocery store and pick their groceries up, and Instacart and Ship growing 45%, and e-com and direct to consumer picking up, while at the same time, food service in a lot of cases has been decimated, right? How has this changed either internally your pivots or externally what you guys are looking at? I'll start with the internal side. Jim and Bridget, sort of from your perspective, what have you seen and how have you pivoted? And then I'd like to talk from Audra and Sean's side as well.
Yeah, Bridget, I guess I'll go first. So yeah, I mean, I think the key, and I'm not gonna say anything surprising here, but the key is adaptability, right? I think you kind of hit on a lot of the key points, Steve, which is, as we look at it, both shopping behavior and then like consumer kind of behavior throughout the day have changed dramatically, right? Like where people shop, store layouts, how people shop, whether it's bulk, multi-pack focus, right? Like what people do in the store has drastically changed and requires taking a look at your assortment and making sure that you're set up and aligned with how they're shopping in the store. And then secondarily, it's what we talked a lot about is how do we serve the consumer in the environment that they're in today, right? So commutes are still happening, right? But it's between the kitchen and the office, or the kitchen and the couch, or wherever people are eating or working for the day. Health and wellness is still important, and in our bars, focused on supporting an active, healthy lifestyle. But how people achieve that is different, right? That whether it's in-home workouts or walks around the block or whatever, it's just very different environment and different reality that people have to adapt to. So what we think about is how do we serve them in the new environment with the products that we have. And then finally, the piece we've been talking about today is from an innovation standpoint, like what take a hard look at what our launch plans are. Do we have the right assortment there? And how do we bring those to market? Because launching in a new product in this time is also very difficult. So the approach to a launch is something that we need to, or we do spend a lot of time on to make sure that we're setting the innovation launch up for success.
And then Bridget, sort of going off that same thesis, because it's really hard, category reviews are starting to come back around. Are you focused more right now on your internal brands and trying to elbow them out a little bit with existing distribution? Or are you still bullish on new brand launches or on the emerging brand side and investment and acquisition side?
Yeah, I'm super bullish, and I would say we're still very bullish on the acquisition venture side, well-being. There's a piece of how do you round out your portfolio and give consumers more choices in snacking, and that's really important. On our existing brands, people were at home, they're finding comfort foods, they're finding brands that they know and love. There's a food safety component to that. So we've seen a really nice bump in the core here in biscuits, particularly in North America. And you saw, to Jim's comment about how do you make PPA, if people are going in, can you give them larger family size because they're going to go through it more than they normally would have in the past. On the startup brand side, I would say COVID also hit us. We were starting in stores, sampling, just getting distribution. And then, March 10th, basically the world closed. And the next thing we said, we have inventory. What do we do with? How are we going to still know if people are interested? And we did I would say faster than anybody, we did a 180 to D2C, where we had been doing this either things online in different ways, but it was how fast can you get these websites up and running? The social media ties, which might have told you to go to stores, how now, and how quickly can we get that to shipping and getting that infrastructure set up? So that was a massive pivot. I would say we delayed some of our innovation projects because honestly, like people aren't in March and April, like people aren't in the headspace to talk about something new. I mean, that simmered down and now we can have a little bit more bandwidth to think about, oh yeah, it's an interesting product and this is when I may use it or I don't like it. But early on, it was like, you didn't even get an honest answer. And I think that reminding that we're talking to humans and how we're living our lives was really important to insights. We pivoted on those as well. How do you move from in person? How do you do digital focus groups where you have really robust samples and engagement in a more intimate way? Pivoting, now we're coming back. How do we sample? How do we go back to the buyers that all said, sorry, I'm just keeping my basic stock there? And we were put on hold like many to sell in new products. So I would say it's been a whirlwind for many, but the core need of people needing more well-being snacks and what they're looking for, whether it's in gut health, in immunity, in healthy snacking. Ruckus & Co. we developed with kids, for kids and parents, and the idea was, as Jim said, it was to put it in your lunchbox and it would thaw out by lunch, and you would have this fresh smoothie for kids. Well, they're not going to school, but you know what? They are running around my house right now, and I would say, the night before, take it out, put it in the fridge, or in the morning, take it out and let it thaw. And then in the afternoon, they could have their snacks and they have a level of autonomy, or I can say yes in the day and I'm not worrying about what they're eating. So that whole piece of like where the commute or where the snacking's happening is still very much there. And I think it's just either being a little bit creative, being a little bit patient, and then willing to flex, right? Plan A was not going to be what we thought. So what's the next plan B, C, and D? And holding those light enough where you can pivot. So watching those investments, managing your capital, your inventory, so you can have a little bit more flexibility to react, that you're not locked up in one area. It's really important.
And Audra, it sounds like based on some previous conversations, you're falling right in line.
Oh yeah, totally. I have so many questions for Bridget about what she just said, but yeah, totally. Like, I was just thinking, so since March 1st, there have been 630 deals done in the food space, venture deals that have been done. There's been $6 billion deployed. This is a space where people are constantly trying to figure out, like, what do we do? How do we innovate? What's the next thing? And I could say, for us at S2G, it's been busier than ever. I think there are a bunch of different opportunities. Bridget, the D2C comment, like, that is a whole new world for everybody. And especially we've got a number of brands that are like kind of branded perimeters. So they require refrigeration, and that obviously introduces a whole bunch of new dynamics in the industry. And as folks think more about eating fresh, that's another piece that we're keeping a close eye on. But moving forward and just kind of thinking about COVID and the lasting impact, a really big area of focus for us now is the convergence of food and healthcare, and food and just medicine. So taking that next step, I think Better For You 10 years ago was step one. And now we're starting to see more developments around healthcare providers and food manufacturers working more closely together. Food manufacturers thinking about incorporating biometric information into developing products. Really thinking about functional ingredients. So that company I mentioned earlier, Solaria Bio, like, how do you create an ingredient that can be used in a cracker that can prevent osteoporosis? I think there's all sorts of stuff that folks are now open to, and because they've been at home, they've been paying more attention to the labels of the food that they've been consuming. I think there is an opening today in digging in deeper there. And then the last piece is from our vantage point, there is huge demand for ESG and investment in ESG companies. So obviously, you know, within food, this is relatively new, but for companies like Vital Farms, they had an amazing exit. They had an amazing story. And I think the market is looking for opportunities to support businesses that have made sustainability efforts and are building more sustainable supply chains, because that means that they're increasing their resilience. And so for us, we continue to think about opportunities through that lens as well, whether it's better packaging or more innovative approaches to resource management. So things like controlled environment agriculture or indoor agriculture. There's just, that's a very dynamic space, and it's really interesting. I mean, it was interesting before, but now because of COVID, there seems to be a spotlight that has been shined on that.
Cool. And Sean, bring us home. You've got multiple perspectives from the client side, the portfolio side, as well as from the inside side. So
yeah. We can have a whole session on COVID and what's happened, but we have a little bit different perspective. I mean, I guess one is, I mean, how we saw this, it was almost binary, right? When this hit us in March. And you kind of remove the reactions and the panic, and you look at what a lot of large manufacturers did. They're looking at three things. One, many of them, you know, cut their brands. They cut the SKUs. They went back to core products. They got rid of these long tail, you know, triple stuff, double mint Oreos. No offense, but they got, you know, the CEO came in and said, you know, let's look at the portfolio. We need to cut brands that are tying up our manufacturing, tying up our supply chain, that aren't producing profit and revenue. And they may never produce revenue, but we're kind of done with that. So then you reset and you say, well, what's our innovation path? What is our innovation path? And I think this is where we probably, my opinion, differs greatly than, you know, this panel a bit. I think inside innovation at the large corporation said, fool me once, fool me twice, you're not going to fool me again. And what I mean by that is that pre-COVID, there was a monster of activity of buying emerging brands and helping support and lift up their brands. They were just, you know, they hung out with cool brands, they would be cool. And if they hung out with emerging brands that were capitalizing on the thirst of the nation of different trends, they would be cool, and maybe they would learn. I think what's happening now is fool me once, fool me twice, and innovation and insights are saying, look, we're not going to buy as much. What we're going to do is really restructure and revolutionize our insights group and partner with these brands. And we might partner with them to learn more. We might do a JV with them. But we're not going to holistically just grab one and think that that's going to be the magic bullet that's going to change 100 years of, you know, Kraft macaroni and cheese. It just isn't going to happen. And then, so the third thing that's happening is just the whole manufacturing supply chain is that they have to make really, really hard choices around innovation and what they're going to run. Whether or not we go to another in shelter, whether or not things change in this, you know, winter that's coming up, there's a lot of concern because that chain is not caught up. And so in order to drive innovation and innovative products, they have to work with manufacturing to have that space, right? And that space is like at such a huge premium right now to get, you know, new products off the market, in the market or into testing. So we've seen a lot of change. It's more of a behavior change. And I think it's great. I think it's like thrilling for us because it really is. I can probably find more an elegant word of fool me once, fool me twice, but they're really restructuring. They're, you know, and we've seen this across. And one last thing, we've all been in different businesses. I was in HR, I was in software, I was in all these different industries, and you would hear about transformation, you know, in HR, transformation in this, transformation in our accounting department. Now it's finally really transformation in insights and transformation in product development. And I think that's what's forced, and, you know, is a very bad thing that's happened. But from what we're seeing in our industry is that there is a transformation around innovation, how they're looking at M&A, how they're looking at these SKUs that are just, you know, tiny profit centers, and it's really affecting the brands and I think the insights group. I might be off the rest. I might be off here, but that's.
I think that's a great perspective. I agree with you. And I think to add on to that, I think there's also new data sets that are being made available that allow you to connect your entire supply chain. And then that allows you to do more supply demand planning, mapping out exactly where your products are coming from or your commodities are coming from. I think we're moving into this like digital twin space where digital and physical are really intersecting.
And I think it's collaboration, a lot more collaboration versus an, 22 multiple. I think it's like a lot more.
Correct.
You're going to see a lot more JVs happening with the large brands to drive, hopefully, innovation.
Cool. Well, I've left a whole 5 minutes for Q&A there, Alan. Sorry, we had some great voices and some great talking and a lot of knowledge coming out of there. But do you want to hit anybody with questions so at least we can get one or two in?
No one has asked any, so
Oh, goodness.
I was actually saying, hey, let's let them go because, but again, such an incredible conversation. But and we started to touch on it just a moment ago with Sean's comments. So what parts of this continue sort of post-COVID into like 3 years from now? Which of these things stick around and which will be changed forever and the market will just be different?
And just to add to that too, I mean, we've seen a slower food movement kind of come around with these people cooking more from scratch and bulk sizes, et cetera. Do you guys see post-COVID, because people might not be going to the office 5 days a week, do you guys see this slower food movement continuing or expanding?
I'll jump in real quick. To answer Alan's question, we did a webinar with a CEO yesterday that runs this digital capability of knowing all the data. And I think the question is going to be the user experience, the shopper insights. I mean, that's dead. Sorry. I mean, right now it's dead. The question is, does that come back? What's the experience in the supermarket? What does the supermarket look like? What's the impulse buy for an RX bar? Now, they're getting tremendous search. So a lot of people are still buying as they have brand followers, but a lot of brands that were emerging, strikes me that they were given shelf space in Whole Foods, or they're set up in the right brand of a experience, and now we have to drive them online to shop for that. So I think the question, Alan, is what's the shopping experience gonna be like 2 years from now? Frankly, I'm sure Bridget had much more, or Jim.
It's radically different. I mean, I would say, and some of it's convenience, right? Like we talk about convenient snacking. If you're on Instagram, right, we talk about, checkout counter, people would buy, this is a product I wasn't planning, but now I'm going to put it in. Scroll on Instagram and you're like, shop now. Oh, I bought this sweater, tried this snack. So even how we live our lives, those moments are getting integrated versus I have to go to the store or I even have to sit on my computer and put an order in. It's coming to me whether I think about it or not. So I think we just have to be really mindful of how do we support that? How do we package products that are allowing that if the retailer now is no longer designing packaging for the shelf, but for just a pick and pack and to make that robust, where do we focus?
Great, thank you for that. One other question came through. I'm going to refine it just a little bit. How are you all sourcing your investment opportunities right now? How has that been, and how has obviously that changed?
I can go first. I mean, I don't think it's changed much for us. So we rely on our extensive network of entrepreneurs that we currently work with or have worked with in the past. We've co-invested with 250 other investors, so they often send deals our way if they're focused on a different region or whatever. And then a lot of our corporate partners, we work with a ton of corporate partners, and they'll send either problem statements our way where they're looking for a certain type of ingredient or brand or whatever to work with, or they'll come across something and they'll send it our way.
I would say we tend to invest in a group. So we're not the sole investor going into this. So we will get this from our private equity partners, the venture capital partners. We partner with incubators and accelerators, so networks like this. If you go to snackfutures.com, we actually have a direct submission that you can reach out to us. And we're going to continue doing that kind of networking as well. So either direct or through your investors.
Terrific. Thanks for that insight on both of you. We are right at noon. Steve, do you have anything more you'd like to cover?
No, just thanks to the panelists for giving the time, the insights, and letting us know how you're making the sausage right now.
Terrific. Yeah, thank you all. Really appreciate the time, the terrific insights, great conversation. Steve, thanks for being the master of ceremonies and doing an amazing job as always. Thank you all. Truly appreciate it.